everyone. Hi, everyone. Welcome to today's webinar, Family Travel, Tips to Increase Bookings. I'm Regina Baraban. I'm Senior Contributing Editor for Recommend Magazine and moderator of this webinar. Our webinar has been made possible by Recommend, as well as the following partners: ASTA, the American Society of Travel Advisors, Florida's Historic Coast, St. Augustine, Ponte Vedra, and Discover the Palm Beaches. The webinar is a complement to the Family Travel Trends survey that was conducted on recommend.com, as well as the 2023 Family Travel Trends Report, which will also be available via a follow-up email, and you can find it via a link on the chat box. I encourage you to use the chat box as we go along. During this conversation with our panelists, we'll speak about family travel and offer tips on how you can sell to this vast market. Right before we begin, just a few housekeeping tips. During the presentation, we encourage you to enter your questions in the chat box. We'll gather them together and hold a Q&A session at the end of the presentation. One lucky attendee will win a $100 gift card. The winner will be announced at the end of the webinar, and you must be present to win. But don't worry if you miss something. This webinar is being recorded, and you will receive a link via email to access the recording at your leisure. So I'm thrilled to welcome our four panelists today: Kim Goldstein, Lauren Doyle, Jamie Margolis, and Barbara Nichols. And I will ask each of them to please introduce yourselves before we get started. Kim, tell us about yourself.
Hi, I'm Kim Goldstein, located in Richmond, Virginia, and I own Journeys Incorporated that has been in business for over 35 years, and I've been in travel 17 years. So thanks for coming.
It's great. Thanks so much for being with us. Lauren, you're next. But you're muted. Hold on, you need to unmute yourself. That's okay.
Let's try that again.
Let's try it again.
Hi guys, I'm Lauren Doyle. I own The Travel Mechanic. We are based in Raleigh, North Carolina, and we're a boutique host travel agency, and excited to talk with everyone today.
Excellent. Thank you, Lauren. Jamie?
Hi, my name is Jamie Margolis. I own Moms at Sea Travel. I started an online community and blog a little over 5 years ago that has since grown into a over 60,000 member community, and just naturally progressed into providing travel planning and selling cruising for families.
Excellent. Thank you. And Barbara?
Yes, hi everyone. I'm Barbara Nichols. I'm the president and CEO of Bayside Travel, based in Bronxville, New York. I've owned the company for 36 years. And am a family travel specialist. Also, I have a consulting company which does coaching and mentoring to those in the industry. And very happy to be on the panel today. Thanks, Regina.
Oh, thank you. We're very happy to have you all for this really current and exciting topic. We were chatting just a bit before we got started about how travel is kind of back with a vengeance. And so we'll be exploring how family travel is back with a vengeance. And let's just jump right in. So I'm going to direct some questions and encourage all of the panelists to just raise your hand if you would like to contribute more to that conversation. And, we'll try to get a good conversation going. Again, to our participants who are listening, thanks so much for joining us, and please enter your comments and questions in the chat box, and we'll get back to you. So Lauren, let's start with you. If you had to describe selling family travel to a newbie travel advisor, how would you describe it?
Well, family travel is such a fun niche, and it's really, I don't want to say complicated, but it's multifaceted because you do have many different destinations that appeal to families. You have your Disney, but you also have a world beyond Disney. And I think as a person or travel advisor specializing in family, you do want to have an open mindset and know what else is out there for the different types of families that want to travel together.
Excellent, thank you. And I wonder, just as a quick follow-up, because we were talking about this earlier too, different types of families. Does any other comments about, like, specifically, what are different types of families? What, what makes one family different from another?
Right. Families are just so unique. I mean, there's just so many different types. And a lot of times the more challenging trips would be the multi-generational trip, when grandparents come along with the main children and then the grandchildren, because you have ages sometimes varying from newborn all the way up to people in their 60s, 70s, and 80s. So meeting the needs of each traveler presents its own unique challenges when you're planning their vacation.
Totally makes sense. And I might ask you all later for, I don't know, any stories about some of these challenges and how you solve them. For now, Kim, our next question is to ask you how or did COVID have an impact on the way your family clients plan travel? And are there any sort of trends resulting from the pandemic that you think are here to stay?
Yes, it definitely had a huge impact on family travel. I don't think anyone would argue that point. I have a lot of family travel, but I also have a very strong destination wedding and honeymoon business. And it's been really interesting to me to see how the different areas of our business have come back at different times. And for us, family travel was that last segment to come back in at full force. I feel like this is the first year we're really back to like pre-pandemic. While we had huge increases in the destination wedding and honeymoon market, our family travel kind of dropped off. So what I'm seeing is some of the differences. I'm finding that families seem to be traveling in larger groups. The desire to travel is very strong. Like, I feel like with some of these families before, you may have had to coerce them a bit. Now they're all on board, ready to go, ready to break free. I'm also seeing, we do have a very strong Disney business in our agency, but we're also seeing a very large presence for international. So I'm seeing more people shift in that direction, although pricing is quite a bit higher, just like with everything, even eggs, everything. We are seeing people aren't as resistant. Like, sometimes I say a price out loud and I'm kind of freaking out behind the scenes, and they're like, okay, we'll do that. And I'm like, okay, let's do it. So I think that's been another area that's been a little surprising for me, is how tolerant people are for the higher price points, because they're so ready to travel with their families and they want to create these memories. So price is not as much of a factor for us as it used to be. I mean, and that's not for everybody, obviously, but for a lot of our clients, we're, again, some of these family vacations that are just simple all-inclusive trips or simple trips to Disney are 8,000 to 10,000 for a family of 4 for a pretty standard, not truly exotic European type trip. So we're really seeing that as a strong factor in our planning of family vacations.
Wow, that's really interesting. Do you all think that in part the pandemic instilled a sense of sort of like carpe diem, in terms of, like, live now, make the memories now, because we, if we at all can, right? If we can at all swing it, even though it's, wow, so much more expensive. Does that make sense to you guys? Yeah,
Yes,
Barbara?
it absolutely does make sense. And I think it also has a lot to do with the distance and having to be apart during the pandemic.
Right.
Families not being able to gather, even at times for holidays and special celebrations, or, gathering in smaller groups and at a distance. So I think that has driven particularly this I know it's a question we were going to get to later on, but it's kind of a good segue.
Okay.
But it has
Mhm.
triggered a real surge in multi-gen travel as well.
Yeah, that's interesting. And we were talking before, because it is a good follow-up on the sort of options of how you make a real multi-gen vacation work, particularly with the adults in the equation who have jobs and not necessarily the time that, say, the retired grandparents will have. And you might want to follow up on that a little, because you mentioned some interesting things earlier about how you structure the vacation times and even sort of add on to a business trip, sort of making it a bi-leisure family vacation.
I think that what we are seeing more and more is that not just grandparents, but even couples or parents extending their trips. We discussed this before the webinar began, and making them into, let's say, 2 weeks, 3 weeks all together. Because again, there's this sense, and absolutely, Regina, I agree with you. The carpe diem sense is that now we want to take advantage. We know that we were prevented from doing this for 3 years or whatever. Some people traveled during, but most didn't. That they want to do it, and they're extending the time. However, as you mentioned, those who are part of that family structure, whatever that is, whether it's nieces, nephews, whether it's children or adult grandchildren who are working or who have school commitments. Right. So we have to get more creative with how we logistically align trips so that the parents can still take that full time that they want and have a portion of the family join them for part of it. So it depends, if it's a multi-country trip, we just look at the logistics and decide, well, maybe it's best that everyone start out together, wherever that is. I gave you that example, Amsterdam and then on to Germany, and logistically being a little bit harder maybe for the moving parts at the back end. So perhaps, the children who work will come for the shorter portion in the beginning and then go home, and then the parents will continue on. And same thing with grandparents, we're finding. So,
right.
Yeah.
Excellent. Thank you, Barbara. And actually, you're next on my list for the next question, which is because it's also a sort of post-pandemic question, and that is, are your clients buying more travel insurance now?
Oh, a resounding yes. And actually, to piggyback on what Kim was saying regarding costs of travel now. So I would say there are several driving forces to the increase in travel insurance. Beside that, my team and I, we really rarely will allow a client to leave anywhere, leave their homes without buying travel insurance. There has to be a compelling reason for them to decline that. It's so very important. But I think that cost is on everyone's mind, so they're willing to make that bigger investment. Perhaps. However, they want to protect their wallets or their pocketbooks. Right. They want to make sure that that investment is protected. I think also what's happening from what we're seeing trend-wise, there's a lot of future travel going on. For example, I'm just working on a trip for the Galapagos Islands for clients for next April. And whereas for their trip, they were going on a biking trip in a few months, they decided not to take insurance. For that trip next year, clearly, they said to me yesterday, we have to have insurance for this. So that ties into the unforeseen nature of the future. So they want to know, they want to plan, they want to dream. They want to know that they have that trip on the books, but they also want to protect it. So that's one thing that I feel is really, really an important factor in deciding to pull the trigger on travel insurance. The other thing is, and it's been in the news for months and months, a year or more, is all the flight delays and cancellations.
Yeah.
And that has just really frightened people and caused them to say, how can can't prevent it, but how can I protect at least, some of the money that I've invested if there's a 5-day delay and I can't make it to the Galapagos Islands or, what have you. So I think that's extremely important. Also, general peace of mind. It does that. It always has done that. And I think and I'm sure my fellow panelists will agree, we all reinforce that. Having travel insurance gives you that extra peace of mind, whether you're there and you become ill because there's emergency medical and dental, there's emergency medical evacuation. We sell separate medical evacuation insurance. And then there's also during the pandemic, there was, and I'm not mentioning supplier names, but there was a specific COVID evacuation coverage that became just that extra layer of peace of mind, particularly for international travel.
Right. Excellent. Thank you. Let's move on to a question I'll address first to Jamie and then to Kim. As senior travel advisors who are experts at selling family travel, how have the suppliers upped their ante to better accommodate families? Jamie, take it away.
Sure. So I'll speak specifically to the cruise component. I think that we're seeing the suppliers creating accommodations that better accommodate families. So we're seeing more cabins for 3 to 5 passengers than we've previously seen on the ships. I know one of the large ships debuting next year has 80% of their cabins able to accommodate 3 guests or more. And they've also increased the number of 5 passenger guests to, more than we've ever seen in the past. We're seeing concepts like split bathrooms. Previously, families would get 2 cabins, 2 closets, 2 bathrooms. Now we're seeing these split bathroom concepts where you've got shower and sink in one and sink and toilet in the other. The families can all stay in that one space. We're seeing expanded children's programming, which I think is fantastic to give a lot more options to the kids and also to allow the parents to kind of go out and have a date night and have some fun while that the kids are having a blast. Another thing that I think we're seeing is what we hear called this stay and play concept, where we're seeing resources kind of conveniently located close to one another. So pool, food, activities, a family can really kind of get into one section of a ship and settle down for the day with all of the resources that they need close by. And then the last thing that I'll bring up before we do jump over to land is I think that the cruise industry is taking land head on, and they've been very open and vocal about saying that. So, and because it's multi-generational, grandparents want to sit and relax, kids want to go on a roller coaster or a crazy water park, we can do that for you. So I think that's a huge change.
Cool, thank you. And so Kim, speaking of land, so how are the land suppliers upping their ante to better accommodate families?
Well, to Jamie's point, I definitely think like a lot of the all-inclusive resorts in Mexico and the Caribbean are really becoming cruise ships on land as well. Like they know they've got a big competitor, so they're trying to put all these bells and whistles. I mean, you just don't see a new family resort being built without a water park now. Like that is a standard, and if you don't have a water park, you are not going to be high on that family travel list. So I feel like they're really trying to increase like the bells and whistles that they include at these properties to keep people entertained, to keep them busy. They just as the cruise ships are, you're seeing a lot more resorts focus on guaranteed connecting rooms. You're going to pay for them, and you're probably going to pay per room, but it's a guaranteed connect so that the parents have the peace of mind that if they get a room with the king and then you've got the room with 2 doubles or 2 queens in it, that their kids are definitely going to be connecting with them, which is huge. You're also seeing, I think I'm seeing some more suite options and villa type options, which again help accommodate the larger families, the multi-generational travel, things of that nature. So I think you're seeing a combination of that. Seeing more connecting rooms. It always amazes me when you're taught, sometimes we're talking to hoteliers and I'll ask like, how many connecting rooms do you have at this brand new family friendly resort? 5. And I'm like, oh my goodness, you need to have more. So I think some of the newer resorts are finally really getting into that and putting it into their design concepts because it's really a deal breaker at this point.
Yeah, interesting. And you mentioned all-inclusive resorts. I was at one last year that had a whole entire family wing. And I mean, it was so attractive. You know, I was like, oh. And, you know, where rooms were specifically designed for families, there was the family pool, there were the amenities for the kids. It was pretty impressive. Does anyone else have any comments on this before we move on to the next question? I see, yep, Barbara.
There's also now a movement with airlines to finally guarantee family seating.
Right. Good point. I just saw that.
Overdue, long overdue.
Yeah. Excellent. Yeah, I think that was just last week or yeah.
Recent.
That's, yeah, interesting. That's great. And actually, Barbara, you're next on my list in terms of who is inspiring your family clients to travel. So is it the grandparents asking for a multi-gen vacation? Is it social media, friends, some combination thereof?
Well, I would say in our business, what we see mostly is it's the grandparents because they're the ones who are paying. So they are usually, they've gathered together with the family and sort of had the initial conversation with them. And then they're very excited about it. Of course, they, need guidance, and they will go back if they're going to go back and consult with their children, and perhaps if they're grown grandchildren, they will get their input. And sometimes we're talking to everyone. Ultimately, we're speaking with everyone. And then I think friends and social media does it play into perhaps the final decision on where they're going to go. But I do see that the inspiration is coming primarily from grandparents. And again, without being redundant, I think it goes back to that feeling of we want to do this. We want to be with our family. We want to make sure that we have this vacation, and they are driving it. So that's what we see. They also still have, I think, more expendable income. And so that's another factor. And often the grandparents will have been clients of ours for years and years. And so we're planning out a few different trips, and this always has to be one of them now. So that's what we're saying.
Cool. And kind of piggybacking on that question, Lauren, are you finding that the children in the family have any influence on the final decision of where to travel or what type of vacation to take?
Yeah, I was just going to comment to Barbara. I'm actually seeing a lot, and I totally agree with you, Barbara. Of course, the grandparents, if they're footing bill, they're the ones you're working with. But I have had a lot, and maybe it's because I'm a millennial that they reach out and see me on social. But a lot of like the kids my age want to do a birthday for their 60th, for their parents' 60th or 70th birthday. So I'm actually working with a lot of my age type of clients that are, I am planning the whole multi-generational trip, but they're the ones that kind of are coming up with the idea and get the ball rolling. And maybe it's because they don't know what to get their parents when they turn 60, 65, and 70. And they're like, let's just go on a vacation, which I think is a great idea. But it's just kind of funny. And it's probably just like our generations, but definitely to go back to the question, I have 2 young kiddos myself, and we travel the world. Obviously, I'm in the travel industry, but I have been on some trips that haven't gone that great when the kids are not occupied. So I do really firmly believe that having the kids happy makes the parents happy. And that even comes down to room types, especially for new parents that are taking their kids out of the country for the first time. You need a balcony. If you're going to be in your room during nap time, at least be able to go out on your balcony and have a cocktail and have a little bit of the vacation for yourself, because it is daunting to travel internationally with young kiddos, whether they're in bottles, diapers, or just they're that school age that, you know, are bickering and fighting with each other. So I do think making sure the kids happy can have a really smooth, successful vacation.
Cool, thank you. And you just got a little follow-up on the chat box. 100% right, Lauren.
They probably have
From
kids and have
Jessica.
experience.
Probably, right. It's great. Any other? Yeah, okay, so now for Kim, sort of a very straightforward question. How many vacations on average are your family clients taking per year? And I think it makes sense to start with this season, because of all of the, you know, changes and turmoil of the past.
I would say most of my like true, just like immediate family with young kids, they are taking 1 international trip a year, if that. I don't have a lot of families that travel every single year. Now I do have older clientele that do that, but you know, a lot of times the ones with kids, and as I've gotten older and my kids have gotten older, my clients have gotten older as well. So they are at the age, a lot of them, where they can't pull their kids out of school and things like that. So really kind of limited on average to 1. Living on the East Coast in Virginia, we have beaches and things like that nearby. So I feel like a lot of people around here rent a beach house, but then they might do 1 big vacation, and that's kind of it.
Yeah, interesting. Thank you. And my next question, Barbara, we've actually already covered to a large degree, but the specific question is, are you currently booking more multi-gen family vacations?
I guess the quick and easy answer on that is yes. We've always done them, but what I'm seeing is definitely an uptick. And where I do see a trend is to more exotic locales as well.
Ah, interesting. Good. We're going to get to a question about locales. Not quite yet. There's a question in the chat room asking what trends you all are seeing for locations, and we are going to get there. But first, Lauren, do you create a 5-year travel plan with your family clients?
Yes, I personally do it, and I suggest every travel advisor do this. During COVID, I have like an old, you could go into my Instagram, it's an old video where I did a training on, since no one could travel, I was like, let's come up with how to do a 5-year travel plan. And I kind of, you know, you list out the years, and as anyone knows that is, you know, have kiddos, whatever age, it goes by fast. Like we can all agree, blink of an eye, and they're already like graduating high school or college. So what you really need to do is kind of look and say, okay, let's figure out our milestones and plan out when you do want to do these big trips. Just like Kim said, people are, yes, they're traveling multiple times a year, but they're not going internationally multiple times a year. Yes, there are those people that do, but they may do a Disney and a cruise, something like that, but they're not doing these extravagant $30,000 trips multiple times a year. I mean, if they are, I want them to be my client, but I do think planning 5-10 years out is a smart thing to do and a great way to educate your clients to get them excited about future trips. If they do want to do those family bucket list type of trips, it's got to be planned out.
That's really good advice. Thank you. Yes, wait, I see a hand. Do I see a hand, Kim?
One thing I'd like to add, as my baby is getting ready to graduate high school and I have one in college, a lot of people are contacting me like they want to take that one last trip before the kids go to college. And as kids get older, for those of you who have just little ones or don't have children, it gets very challenging to schedule. We're down to like, okay, we can travel these 5 days the entire summer. And it gets very, especially if they do sports or any activity that is very time consuming, similar to sports. So working that into a travel plan is really important. I've had a couple clients this year actually which I've never had in 17 years. I've had a few that are trying to travel to all 50 states, and they got to their 50th state this year. And I was like, well, that was weird. I had 2 in 1 week, but really trying to map that out because it does get a lot harder as they get older because their schedules become less flexible. Right. And so working that in is really key.
And, you know, one other comment too, from the first question, if you are an advisor, obviously we're all advisors on this call, when you are thinking about specializing in family travel and really getting into that ideal client and what type of family is going to be your ideal client, you need to also think about all of these factors that we're talking about, like Barbara discussing, you know, this multi-generational, reaching that older grandparent that's going to be paying for the whole trip. Then you got the senior groups, which that is a huge, a lot of my family trips are that. Or then you have the parents that are celebrating 60th and 70th birthdays. And then to you, Jamie, your cruise and how it appeals to everyone. So you really have to kind of pick all these little niches and, you know, really get into the mind of the family traveler.
Yeah, absolutely. It sounds, there are many good choices. And then I would think that it comes down to what you might call the psychographics of your travelers, you know, what their interests are, what activities resonate with them. Are they athletic? And like, what do you do if you have a family group, and, you know, you have a few very athletic travelers in that group, and then you have some who are not, you know, and I know, Jamie, that cruises, I know there's a lot of good answers to that, but I think you're absolutely right. Thank you. And actually our next question gets to, well, first, just a little feedback from the chat from a previous conversation is that we have some feedback from the participants who are definitely booking more multi-gen and higher price point family trips now. And the question on the chat, what trends are you seeing for desirable locations, which Kim, we'll start with you for this, and then I would love if others chip in. Like, where are your family's clients going on vacations, and what destinations, in your opinion, are standouts for family travel?
So right now, as always, Mexico and the Caribbean, specifically like Punta Cana is a hot spot, Cancun, Riviera Maya, because of the price point. I mean, those are where you're going to get your best value for the most part. So we have a lot of people going there, as we always do. That's not really a new trend for us. What I've seen uptick this year, to the point that is a little overwhelming, is the desire to go to Europe with the family. And as we come upon all these strikes in Europe, I realized just how many spring break families I have in Europe, because, you know, you book them and you don't necessarily remember when they're all traveling, and then you start looking at them, you're like, oh wow, they're all going to be there at the same time. So that's an area that I've really seen pick up this year, is the desire. I think, in my opinion, this is the first year that Europe is really fully reopened and ample planning time, so people are really taking advantage of that. I mean, it was busy over there, don't get me wrong, last summer, but I think it's going to be a whole different ballgame even again this summer. So that's where I'm seeing the biggest uptick.
Yeah. Do you see any particular European destinations as standing out?
I'm getting more France than I used to get, but honestly, every call I get is different, because my team would love to be able to replicate itineraries to help preserve our sanity, but we cannot do that because everybody wants 2 and 3 stops. They want to go different places. So I'm seeing a huge mix, you know, France, Italy, Greece, Spain, you name it. It's all over.
We have a message in the chat from Louise Bates in Wisconsin, and she's booking her East Coast clients in Spain. So, yeah.
Europe is popular.
I'll add a little bit from the cruise side also, private islands. And you mentioned, you know, how things changed after COVID. You know, when the cruise lines were first starting back up, one of the places that they could go was their private islands, and it became a great option. What I think came out of that is a lot of people that hadn't really considered the private islands for their itineraries previously go, okay, these private islands, they are onto something. And I would say probably 90% of the cruises that we sell stop at one of the suppliers' private islands, to the point that, you know, you have ships sailing out of the Galveston market that have had to offer increased length itineraries because there was such a demand to go and visit the private islands. So that's a change that we're seeing.
Interesting. And Barbara, you had
Yes, I was going to say that Portugal is very hot this year, extremely hot. And so is Sicily, of course, because of White Lotus. Everyone wants to go to Sicily and they're trying to get there. So actually, to piggyback Lauren's conversation about the 5-year plan, which I think is absolutely brilliant. The other reason it's really helpful and important, not just for milestones, those are wonderful thought, absolutely, you know, very, very important and practical in the planning stages, is that with the lack of availability this year, the 5-year plan becomes even more important, because you can't really get to Sicily so easily this year. Or perhaps, you know, you think you're going to plan now and you want to get to Iceland in June and there is no space. So we're sort of saying, well, so let's talk about what was your other thought for this year, and then let's start to plan immediately. Either once this trip is sewn up, we'll plan the next one for next year and then the year after that. I've always found that to be a really helpful tool, but now it's critically important with the space limitations in Europe that we're finding.
Yeah, wow, interesting.
A travel trend that I've been seeing, that I don't know if you guys see this, that I don't like, is more of a last minute need to go somewhere. And it's really tough for us as the travel advisors. Like 3 months is not enough time to plan a European vacation. I mean, I'm just at the point where I'm like, it's closed now. Like, I do not want to get another inquiry for that last week of June into July to go to Italy, because it's just not happening. My preferred properties, maybe you could pitch a tent or find a hostel, fine, but you know, don't think about going to the Amalfi Coast then if you haven't booked it. So I just turned someone down literally earlier this week, because I was like, no, I can't book something in 30 days in Italy with all of these people. You know, it's not just 2 people going away, it's a family. So I've seen that. I hope I'm not the only one. If I am, I guess it's just random, but plan ahead is my advice to consumers.
Absolutely. And you see the turnaround time from suppliers is extended and extended and extended. And some of those suppliers as well are turning down business. You know, the point here, I think, for everyone, you know, listening to the webinar is that if you can't fulfill their wishes and their desires at the level of service that you're normally accustomed to providing, it's better to say, no, not this year. Do it next year. Yes, you could patch something together, but it's not going to be that ultimate experience. And if it isn't, better, I think I agree with you. You say, no, we're not going to do. We have suppliers who are turning it down. I have a supplier in Japan who just said that they're not taking any requests for vacations there from now until after June.
Yeah.
So that is, everyone's excited about it, but it's also frustrating. But it's a realistic, there's something that you really need to discuss with clients in that initial intake is their expectations, to manage their expectations and your sanity, as someone else mentioned.
Yeah.
Good points. Jamie, let's turn to cruises for a bit now, and we've covered this a little bit already, but you might want to summarize again for us the top reasons your family clients choose cruising as their vacation mode.
Sure. This actually wasn't my plan, but I'm going to share a little bit from a personal perspective on this one. My husband and I cruised before our children were born. When our daughter was born, we were 6 states away from any family members. I was not utilizing any sort of childcare. I was her primary caregiver day in, day out. And we leaned on cruising for a break. I remember thinking, if we can just get to that ship, I have kids clubs. I don't have to do any laundry. I don't have to plan any meals. I don't have to plan any activities. It was just such a weight off my shoulders as a parent. So I think just this concept of like the one-stop shopping, you can add packages, excursions, all of these various things, but you don't have to. For families, the ship becomes the destination, and it just becomes very simple. Another thing, I think it was Lauren mentioned, different types of families, and you kind of tried to tease that out. What do you mean by different types of families? You have families that want to hang glide off the side of a mountain, and you have families that want to sit on a beach and do nothing. And so that's where I kind of call cruising a little bit of like a choose your own adventure. I don't know if you remember the books. You get to the end of the chapter. Do you want to go to chapter 4 or 6? I don't know, right? And with a cruise, you can choose your own adventure. You can choose chapter 4 or chapter 6. You're going to have a great time either way. But you can accommodate these things, or you have the grandparents who go, I just want to sit. My grandchildren, they want to go ziplining. Okay, like we can do that. Done. Like you can just accommodate so many different types of families, so many different. I'll take it a step further and say speeds of families, because we'll definitely have the families that are go, go, go. We want all the activities. We're up at 7 a.m. My family, personally, I've got lucky with kids that sleep in. We're going to sleep in. We're going to do a whole lot of whatever we feel like doing at that moment. Very little structure, very little planning. And one of my advisors, she is the super type A. Everything is planned. She's up at 7 a.m. I can't travel with her. We're very different. And we both have the same level of passion for cruising, and we both get the same level of fulfillment out of it, even though we cruise very differently.
Yeah, that's really interesting. And aside from the private islands you mentioned earlier, which is quite interesting, what are some of the other top choices in terms of the cruising, where your families are cruising to?
Alaska. And I can't quite put my finger on what has sparked this surge in interest in Alaska. I wish I could say, everyone's watching this sitcom like, White Lotus. I don't know what it is, but we are getting huge levels of interest in Alaska. Of course, Caribbean, it's simple. Families can do it easily. They can get down there pretty easily. A lot of people are within drive. But this huge interest in Alaska for families.
Interesting. Are there more ships now sailing in Alaska?
I don't know that I don't specifically know the answer to that. There are fantastic level ships. So the suppliers have definitely responded, but to what you guys were also speaking to with, you have to plan ahead. If you want to go to Alaska this summer,
No way.
pick something else.
Yeah.
And I'm the same with Lauren. If you want to go on a cruise in 3 months, people are going, find me a deal for a cruise in 3 months. Okay, first of all, everything is booked for 3 months out. We're scheduling travel for 6 to 9 months out. In fact, as soon as spring break ends, we're about to start pushing for the holidays and next spring break already. Like, if you're not booked for next spring break, you're almost already behind on that. And we also get a lot of emails that say, hey, I want a really good deal on a cruise in 3 weeks. And we've gone, oh my God, like, we are hearing the word deal more than ever. I think part of it's wave season and consumers are kind of trained to look for all of those incentives, as they should be. But we tell them, like, we can find you a great value. You are likely going to have a little bit of sticker shock if this is what you're looking for. And they go, well, why can't I find a deal? Well, because these ships are sailing full. The suppliers have very little incentive to drop prices right now.
Wow, it's crazy. I mean, in a good way. We got a sort of affirmation comment from Jessica Reyes, who is highly recommending cruising for families with young children, especially. Because something for everyone. And then the final cruise question is there are lots of new ships that keep coming online, and when you're working with your family clients, do you tend to focus on one cruise line that you think is best for families, or do you recommend the cruise lines based on your particular family clients?
Sure. I'm a little bit uniquely positioned in that I built my business focusing on a specific supplier. We learned that supplier inside and out. We have expanded. I've sailed on multiple cruise lines. And so what I really try to do is look at the needs of the family. Do you have a kid in diapers? That's going to really change what I'm going to present to you. As your children get a little bit older, they're out of diapers, they're potty trained, they are independently going to the bathroom. You're going to start opening up all different lines, itineraries. So, we really try to look at the family and what the resources are that we need and how we can support them and make sure that when they get on that ship, they have what they need. Because we'll have people come back and they go, I just took my 2-year-old on a cruise and it was difficult. It was really challenging. And we say, well, I'm so sorry you had that experience. What ship did you go on? And they'll mention a 20-year-old ship with no resources whatsoever for their child. And we'll say, well, we might have recommended a different choice. Now, if you had an 8-year-old and it was a port intensive itinerary, that might have been a great fit, but you were on a ship that just didn't have the resources that you needed. So, water activities for kids in diapers, the different age kids clubs and the ages that they'll take will help guide what ships recommend.
Absolutely. Thank you. And let's move on to Kim first to tell us about the alternate popular reality of theme park vacations for families. And is vacationing at a theme park a top priority for your family clients, Kim?
I would say definitely yes. A lot of our family business has been built upon that quintessential first trip to Disney, and then they expand from there. And, we've got what I would consider lifetime clients now who, we did their Disney trip many years ago, and now we're doing graduation trips. I'm even doing spring break trips. Like some of their college kids are going on spring break. I'm like, oh, I'm getting old. But anyway, so I definitely think the theme park is a huge part of family vacationing. I will say in our business, we have seen a decrease in our theme park and maybe an increase in cruising in a very specific line. So and I think because the theme parks in Florida are very full, like everything. They're very expensive right now, and supply and demand, they can get that price, and they've gotten more complicated. So one of the trends we're noticing is I do have an agent in Charlotte. So she's in a very drivable market to Florida. She used to get a lot of repeat guests down to Florida theme parks. Now she's like, I'm not getting those. They're taking a cruise or doing something different because the price point has gotten so much higher, and they just want a little different value for their dollar, I believe. So we're seeing it. Well, it's important. It's also maybe not as important for some people to do multiple trips like it used to be.
Interesting. Thank you. And Lauren, just as follow up to theme parks, do you have any comments in terms of how you focus a theme park vacation for your family travelers? Do you like focus on one that you think is best, or do you sort of recommend based on the families themselves and what's coming up in the market?
Yeah, I think people, if they are overwhelmed by going to a theme park in Florida, they do reach out to a travel advisor. And I'm not sure if we're dancing around the words specifically, but I'm just going to go with the flow. I think we all know what we're talking about.
Yeah.
Doing a split stay theme park is very popular, but they need a travel advisor to guide them through it, especially first timers. So I personally don't book a lot of Disney, but our team does. We have a Disney division. We have a few people that are just specializing in that. They have so many repeat clients that just want to keep going back year after year. I mean, I don't fully understand it. I mean, there are diehards out there, and you can't, as many advisors are new into the industry or just really wanting to get into family travel, you can't ignore, not saying you have to specialize, but you just can't ignore the value of Disney, because we're all just trained to kind of go do that Disney trip like Kim was talking about. It's on a family bucket list, so to speak, but it's complicated. And I don't, it's multifaceted, and they will go to a few different parks, Park Harper's, Genie Plus, it just goes on, the perks and add-ons for a theme park experience.
Well, I think you used a really good word in terms of our overall conversation about family travel today, and that is multifaceted. There's so many great choices for families out there, and it's complicated, as you all have well brought up, and I'm really happy you brought up the planning aspect and how important it is for families to work with a travel advisor to plan ahead, be realistic. All that's really, really good advice. And I want to thank you all. And before I end with some just a little bit of information, does any of our panelists have anything that you would like to add to the conversation? We've covered a lot today, and I want to remind all the participants listening that there will be a link to the 2023 Family Trends Report from Recommend Magazine. There's a link in the chat room that you can use right now to access it, and the link will be included in a follow-up email. We have a nice comment from Laura Johnson to all of us that said we were nicely organized. Thank you. Always good to hear. And exciting news, we have a winner of the $100, who is Jessica Reyes. And forgive me if I pronounced your last name wrong, Jessica, but there will be follow-up to you with your $100 prize, and letting you all know that coming up, the next Recommend webinar is strategies to help you sell more romance travel. And that will be on Wednesday, June 28th. And it's a romance travel focused webinar, hearing from your peers who know where to look for the best destination wedding, honeymoon, and general romance bookings. And then the family travel comes a few years after that. Ha ha ha. Okay, so thank you all very much. Oh wait, here's 2 new messages. Let me just see if there's Jessica has thanked us. And if there are no further comments or questions, I'll thank everyone and wish you a really terrific afternoon. Thanks, everyone.
Bye, thanks.
Bye.